Way back in the day, I'm talking, BC sometime, there was a Greek philosopher called Zeno. And Zeno, his teaching was largely by way of paradox. Paradox. And I'll give you an example of one of his paradoxes. He says that what say the Greek god Achilles, who was the fastest of all the gods, had a race with a tortoise. So Achilles and the tortoise gather together, and Achilles, being a decent sort of chap, gives the tortoise a head start. He says, I'll give you 100-yard start. So off the tortoise tuttles. And then once the tortoise has gone 100 meters, 100 yards, Achilles chases after the tortoise. And in no time at all, he makes the 100 yards. But of course, when he's gone 100 yards, the tortoise has gone 10 yards. So the tortoise is still ahead. So Achilles dashes that 10 yards, and by that time the tortoise has done 1 yard and is still ahead. So Achilles goes the 1 yard, and by that time the tortoise has gone a tenth of a yard and is still ahead. And when Achilles dashes off the tenth of the yard, the tortoise has got 100th of a yard. And if you follow this down, it's obvious that it's impossible for Achilles to ever catch up with the tortoise. Now, when you think of that paradox, there's an easy way to disprove it, of course. You get a fast person and you get a tortoise and put them in the same room together and see if it works out. And of course, the person will always catch up with the tortoise, but the logic says that they can't ever do it. And here's the thing with a paradox. When you encounter one, it's not that the world is somehow askew. It's that your way of describing the world is askew. A paradox is a challenge to us to think through to the very core the way we organize the world. Because our brains have got two functions, broadly speaking. There's a large part of our brain which interacts with the world, and another part of the brain which analyzes and assesses and orders our interaction with the world. And that analyzing and assessing and ordering enables us to do important things. It enables us to understand. It enables us to use things in the world. It enables us to control the things that are around us. But sometimes we forget that our methods of organizing the world and understanding the world are a kind of secondary step. They are not the world, although sometimes we do tend to confuse the two. And this, I guess, is what the doctrine of the Trinity is. It's a paradox. And no doubt all over the world this morning, in churches from one end of the globe to the other, there's people like me busy trying to explain the Trinity. And I'm too old. I'm too grey. I'm too slow to ever fall into that trap again. The whole point of the Trinity is that it's a paradox. It's inexplicable. And of course, this is nothing new. We look at the physicists who spoke 100 years ago, and they started to speak of paradoxes in the world around us. They spoke of particles which were in two places at the same time. They talked of particles which were so far apart that information couldn't pass between them, but if you fiddled with one of them, the other one would also change. They talked of matter being two contradictory states, a wave and a particle at the same time. And as with other paradoxes, this was not saying that the world was somehow strange, but that our way of interpreting the world was strange. When we have a God who created the heavens and the earth, God is not able to be understood. God is not able to be controlled or used. God is not able to be possessed. And these are the functions of the ordering part of our brain. And so God will always be beyond the ordering part of our brain. The old ones understood this exactly. When Moses came down from the mountain with the 10 commandments, remember what the first 3 commandments were. Don't have any other gods. Don't make images. Don't take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. And what's that about? It's about our interactions with a God who can't be known, can't be grasped, can't be controlled. And those 3 commandments are about stopping us doing that. Well, we look at the paradox that's the Trinity. And there's a temptation to think, well, we can't know God. Let's just move on, shall we? But Jesus invites us to something else. Because the Trinity does reveal some aspects of God. That if God is like anything, God is more like a person than anything else. That the very foundation of God is God's loving action to us in Jesus. And although we can't ever understand it, the doctrine of the Trinity calls us into personal relationship and calls us into love. This is summed up for me in words that are now 600 years old. In the 1400s, an old monk wrote to a young monk and gave some wise advice, which is now contained in a book called The Cloud of Unknowing. And one of the short sermons which comprise that book starts like this. I know you'll ask me, how do I think on God as God? And who is God? And I can only answer, I don't know. Your question takes me into the very darkness and cloud of unknowing that I want you to enter. We can know so many things. Through God's grace, our minds can explore, understand, and reflect on creation and even on God's own works. But we can't think our way to God. That's why I'm willing to abandon everything I know to love the one thing that I cannot think. He can be loved, but not thought. By love, God can be embraced and held, but not by thinking. By love, God can be embraced and held, but not by thinking. So may we all avoid the trap of trying to explain and trying to think our way to God. May we instead answer the invitation to the way of love, which will lead us to the truth at the heart of all things. Amen.